Hey, this is Craig with the Everyday Makers. Today's video, we got a relatively short project for you that kind of is timely with the upcoming holiday. We're going to be turning simple dimensional hardwood lumber available at most big box stores into a cutting board. And this is, of course, I know you're surprised somebody made a cutting board video because you've never seen one of those before 17 times a day. But today we're going to show you basically just a really easy way to do it. There's too many people out there that require every special tool possible to make them, and they make amazing cutting boards, and I'm not knocking that one bit, but I don't have that kind of budget. I just want something quick and simple. I made one for a present not too long ago. I actually made two of them a present not too long ago. Turned out great. I'm super happy with them, and I'm going to make one for myself. This one's made out of aspen. I've got some maple laying around that I kicked around using. But the stuff that I have has almost like a purpley core to it, and it's not what I'm wanting. I'm wanting a smooth texture for this particular project, smooth color across it. So we're going to aspen. Let's do it. Okay, this one's relatively easy, like I mentioned. We're going to aspen. This is 1x2, so 3/4 by 1.5, give or take. Let me double check my measurements because I've been known to be dumb. 3/4 by 1.5. So this stuff's always available at big box stores and stuff. It's really easy to find. Does not require a planer, doesn't require a jointer. It's just done and ready. It's meant for small projects, but we can do it for something a little bit bigger than that. Yeah, so I've got a handful of sticks of it here. I had 2 full 8-foot sticks left over from a project that I did that I bought a little too much, which is never, of course, a bad thing. And then a couple little offcuts here and there that I can add to it just for a little bit more amount of stuff. What we're going to be doing, set up a stop block. We're going to set the stop block up to 2¼ inches. Make 2¼ inch chunks of this board. Make a lot of 2¼ inch of chunks of this board. We're going to make the easiest cutting board you ever made. I'll show you. Okay, now we're back to the trusty table saw assembly table. Works great, don't let anybody tell you different. Okay, so we have a lot of blocks. Whole bunch of blocks. And they're all the exact same size. I'm going to thin out some that have kind of a slightly thinner size to them, which we can use for a border around the outside, but I don't want to use them for the main field of everything. The other ones are way nicer and better put together. So we'll check for any weird size and shape blocks, but they should all be pretty much the same. Shorties here. And all these will be useful just in different ways. I'm lucky these shorties have kind of a different texture on one side where they weren't finished quite right. Makes them way easier to thin out because you can just see it for the most part. Okay, got them all thinned out. These are going to be my cutting board. Something a lot of people do, and I picked this up actually making a checkerboard cutting board that I was made one out of, I don't remember, poplar and red oak. Nice looking little functional cutting board. It was more so of a practice board than anything, but it worked really well. I was real happy with it. We still use it every single day in my house. I noticed that when I was buying at the blue big box store, buying 2x2 dimensional lumber. So when I was buying hardwood, oak, 2x2 lumber, it was actually 2 1x2s sandwiched together and glued. So that's all it was 2 separate pieces of wood. It was not a 4x4, or not a 2x2. it was two 1x2s glued together, so there's a seam in the middle. I'm not wholeheartedly against that seam. It's definitely a look of its own, but I'm not wholeheartedly against it. The one thing that made me realize is that I can kind of make any dimensional lumber out of what I want to make it out of, kind of thing. For this one, I'm going to use a whole bunch of blocks of essentially 2x2. The way that I do this, and try and get a little better close up of it here in a second. The way that I do this, it makes it to me a little bit better. The product makes it a little more stable, and just visually adds a little bit of interest in something that normally you would try to hide, which is grain lines. Take your 2x2 chunks here, turn them 90. So now you've got one seam going lengthwise, one seam going widthwise, and I alternate this through the whole board. It sounds real dumb, but I've been very, very happy with it, and the boards are rock solid. I've been very, very pleased with it. We have not been friendly to the board that we use most of the time at the house, and it's held up like a champ. I mean, there's not a beginning split anywhere in it at all. I mean, it's gotten plenty wet. It's gotten cut on nonstop. It's had children using it, which are trying to figure out how to use a cutting board properly. Like it's definitely done its time. Holding up like a champ. I'm real happy with it. So I crossed the seams, and that makes it a little bit better because then you have, rather than every seam running the same where you got more chance of a split, you now have a board capping that off and making that a little bit more solid on the seam. You do this for the entire thing and essentially checkerboard the whole thing with all one color wood. So it adds a lot of stability to it. It works really, really well. I'm very, very happy with it. And the best part is it's really quick and easy. You don't have to plane it a million times. You don't have to do anything to it. The way I'm going to build this, and you'll see how quickly this goes together, glue all these blocks together, and then I've got a flattening sled that uses a router, flattens it right off, and it's pretty much done. There's not much to it. I'll be doing a juice groove in the outside of this, probably doing an undercut in the bottom so you can slide a plate under it, which is really super handy, and that's one of the greatest things I ever saw somebody do. Then add some feet. It's a very, very quick and easy project. I built one for my friend's wedding in right about 24 hours total, and it was fantastic. Turned out, the finish on it couldn't have been any better if I tried. It turned out absolutely beautiful. Real simple project. So, we're going to start assembly. Okay, that's it for today. Glued everything up with Titebond 3 because it's waterproof, or at least water resistant, or trade for cutting boards, kind of the standard. That last row that I put on over here, I put on with the kind of uneven blocks. I have a feeling I'm going to end up cutting that off once I get done because the spacing is just a little bit too bad. I was hoping I would salvage some of it, but oh well. Short of that, it'll just be cleaning up the lines when I get done with this. Like I said, trimming things down. Short of that, we're waiting for glue to dry and reattack this tomorrow. Okay, so here we are. Glue's dry, ready to go. Basically, the next step is just take off the clamps, and then I'm actually trim it down a little bit. The blocks that I was a little bit suspect of didn't work out so well, so I'm just going to chop them off. No big deal, just make it a little bit smaller, but I think we'll live. Especially for a project, for the most part, made of extra wood. Okay. And for anybody wondering, these are 1-inch square tube steel stock, just from big box store stuff. Nothing special. They make really, really, really great calls when they come off. The glue, for the most part, doesn't stick to the metal. It's relatively all cheap, and it is solid as a rock. You can put some very, very serious pressure on it. So yeah, very cool thing to have. Not super hard to cut. Make them the size that works for you. Do I have some undried glue? I think I might. Okay. So, and we're all done. I'm just kidding. It's really ugly right now. Cool. So, I'm going to chop this down. Let's see what I've got for my best overall look here. This section needs to go. For the most part, I think everything else will be really easy, just simple wood filler kind of stuff. Some of the gaps every now and then will be just real small, but you can just shove some wood filler in there. You'll never see it. And that all comes very, very easily with sanding and flattening and such. So yeah, so we'll go ahead and get this chopped off here, and then we'll be ready for the next step. Okay, so because I'm having a real long day and I'm not exactly at my best, completely forgot to show you the concept of squaring up the sides and all that good stuff. All it was, table saw cut down each end, shoved it in the miter saw, squared off the sides. You've seen a million other DIY videos of people squaring stuff up. You didn't really miss anything on this one. Same thing. Okay, now we're going to go to flattening. Flattening requires a flattening jig. This is also something that if anybody has any interest in seeing a video on how to build one, I can show you how to build mine. Short of that, there's a million videos out there that show you how to build them, and they're probably better than mine. So honestly, just look for somebody that you really, really like their design, build that. Short of that, we're going to switch over to flattening. This uses a router and a flattening bit. Let me grab my flattening bit here. Flattening bit. This is a flattening bit. You can somewhat see it there. This particular one has 3 cutting heads, or 3 teeth, as it were. Spins around, makes everything flat. It's just kind of a simplistic blade. It'll run across the top and just shave everything down to one consistent height. And the way this works is basically you take the flattening jig, take the router, run it back and forth, move a little bit. Back and forth, move a little bit. Back and forth. You just keep doing that until the whole thing's flat. We'll do this once on one side, probably eating away little by little. It really shouldn't take much. This is pretty flat considering all the blocks are cut the same size. But it requires a little bit of something. We'll cut down one side, get it all flat, then we'll flip it over into the other side. This is a whole lot cheaper to replace than planer blades, and planer blades don't do half the job this does on end grain. So it's a nice and easy process. Makes a ton of mess, which is entertaining always to me, but yeah, we'll go ahead and knock it out. I'll show you how to do this. Okay, flattening jig's all set and ready to go. Basically all this is a slide. This piece I just happened to make out of some aluminum that I had laying around. Slides across rails, nice and flat. The router rides in the middle here. Back and forth across the piece. Basically that gives you consistent, smooth lines in this direction and this direction. Makes everything flat. You can do a lot of wiping out of some material pretty quickly on this. This is definitely something that I would say chip at a little bit more repetition than you would normally do. Don't just try and gun it and go, because it will do a heck of a job real quick. But you can also really dig out a lot of your piece that you didn't mean to dig out. So little tiny bits. The way I do it is I'll do my first pass real light, see if there's still high spots where they're at, figure out roughly how high that is from where I'm at now, adjust, move down a little more, and keep going across. You don't want to eat up too much of your material. It just kind of is a waste at that point. So let's do some flattening. Okay, makes a little bit of dust, just a wee bit. Don't even worry about it, just a little bit. Actually, this router, as much as I love it, has the worst dust collection on the planet. Basically, it just kind of whips out everywhere. But whatever, gets the job done. I got a vacuum, so I'm not worried about it. If you haven't seen the vacuum video, watch the vacuum video. We got 90% of the field here seems to be relatively flat. We're going to go over again, at least with a light pass, to make it a little bit prettier, but other than that, it's pretty flat. This very end part here rolled off just a little bit, so I got to hit it a little bit deeper just to catch that in there. I'm actually going to start at whatever depth that ends at, so I just make sure I knock it off this pass. So we'll do the same thing we did before, roll over the top of it, adjust it down just a little bit more. Oh, it's barely even there. So cool. Another 16th, maybe 32nd of an inch, it'll be flat. So let's do it again. That looks beautiful. And I know it makes me really, really old, but that completely reminds me of the sound of an old dot matrix printer. Just bam, bam, bam. So it reminds me of that every time. Okay, so I'm going to clean off my immediate dust here. Just get the board ready, and then we're going to flip it over. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, chips cleaned up. And one thing to remember also with flattening is the flatness of your board depends on kind of the cleanliness of your board too. That's something that cleaning it up, just because I'm weird and I can't deal with those chips sitting there. But if you get any sort of chips under it that make your board a little uneven when you set it down, now your board's going to be uneven. So you got to make sure to clean those chips out. So now we loosen this up a little bit. Flip her over. I do this a very weird way, so just kind of roll with me on this one. I don't have cool side clamps and stuff, so I've made top clamps work as side clamps. Gets the job done. I'm happy with it. I don't have to buy extra stuff. I'm cool with that. Okay. So now we're flipped over. We're going to knock this out again. So we got to start by going through and setting our height like we did before. Now it should be pretty much the exact same, but we want to cut down a little bit more because we're now cutting into fresh wood rather than just the same height. But it should be a good height to start with. So just you want to lift your router up just a touch. Just you don't want to overdo it, but just give you something to start with. And let's do it. I got to be honest, I am nailing these start positions. That was about, once again, 90% of what I needed to cut off. And I've got a couple little low spots there. Go measure those out and finish the sucker. And that's a flattening jig. It's pretty flat. Of course, it's not finished. You're still going to need to sand and sand a lot. But in-grain part, it's really, really hard to work with. It's flat as can be right now. Yeah, both sides are flat relative to each other. Yeah, I'm real pleased. So now we're going to go ahead and start the next process, which is sanding. Not my favorite. We're going to sand, then after we get it to a reasonable start on the sanding, then we're going to go through and do all of our various trim and all that good stuff before doing any sort of finishing. Okay, we're on to the sander. The sander is one of my favorite and least favorite things. Makes everything look super nice, but it generally takes a while. I got to work through your grits and such. For the moment, I'm starting at, I think, 60. Yeah, 60. That'll remove quite a bit of material. We're basically just trying to get it to be finished-ish looking, just kind of what we're going to eventually work with to make it pretty. For now, we're trying to knock off any extra burrs on the side, things like that. give it a real quick once over. There's a lot, when you do ingrain on a flattening jig, there's a lot of kind of broken ingrain. You got to sand through all that. It's way faster than trying to flatten with it, but it takes a minute to get it all looking pretty, and it's worth the work. If you can get down past the little broken chunks, it's so worth the work. It looks absolutely beautiful, but you got to be willing to put in the effort. So that's the one downside, but get to it. Little tip on your sanding. If you go through every now and then on an ingrain board, especially, suck up your sawdust out of the grain, you can actually see what's sanded down and what's not. Because a lot of times it'll pack in and it'll look fantastic. And then the first time you like blow air on it or something, it loses all the stuff. So yeah, that went from basically ready to put some finish on to a lot of stuff I got to work on still. So let's keep working. Alrighty, we are sanded pretty solid at 60. I'm fairly happy with it. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, while I've got it kind of rough sanded right now, I'm going to go through, there's a handful of voids here and there, nothing gigantic, but just enough that they need filled. I'm going to fill those, and I'm also going to decide which side is my top, which side is my bottom. The one cool thing about cutting boards is the fact that unless you're making a double-sided one, you have the option to pick a good side and a bad side. Bad side, 99% of the planet's never going to see, so it's real easy. So yeah, basically I'll just go through and pick the side with the least amount of voids and make that my top side, and the side with the most amount of voids be the bottom side. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and mix up some wood filler just with the sawdust with the sanding dust I just pulled out, and some more wood glue. Mix that up to a paste, shove it in the holes, and then once that dries, we'll sand that down. Easy process, keeps everything color matched, looks really good. So let's do that. Okay, more of my buddy Type 3 here, and using again this little silicone. It's referred to as a shaving cup. I misquoted it in one video, said it was a dog dish. Meant for shaving cream, evidently. But it's a little tiny guy, give me a proportion how big it is. Little silicone tray. This thing is amazing for glue because it's a little cup that glue doesn't stick to, so you can fill it up and work with it, and it's awesome. Now we'll do a little mixing, and you can buy wood putty all day long, and if that's what makes you happy, do that. I'm pretty easygoing. I am not judgmental on the way that you have to do it by woodworking standards. Whatever works for you, do it that way. Super fine sawdust here. And stir. Okay, got our custom wood filler here. Go through basically and just pick out any spots that need a little patch and really work it down in there. And they'll disappear almost immediately if you did it right. If you're not trying to really save a 1/4 inch gap or something like that. Little gaps though, it just shoves right in. This also would be very useful with a putty knife. Work it in there. Then you can leave it kind of goopy because we're going to sand this part again probably several times. So don't get too overly crazy. Just get it shoved in there so you're sure it sticks. You can leave a little topper on it, something to shave off. You can also shove this anywhere that you've got any kind of real big scratchy voids in the end of the wood. It'll work there too to help kind of fill those spaces. And if you're wondering, yes, I made way too much of it. I'm definitely aware of that. Go around the outside here, see if we got anything here to fill. Yes, of course I do. That guy's a glue line. This is the void. We'll make her nice and pretty. And this is also something I will never brag about being amazing at, because I never want to brag about my ability to cover up my terrible glue seams. So, we'll just pretend all these came out perfect. Like for this particularly bigger one, really smash it in there, get it in as deep as you can. And some of these also, once we get this board oiled, will kind of puff up themselves as they soak up the oil. So it's definitely not the end of the world if you have a little one here and there, like, no big deal. Right now, I'm just kind of getting overly excited about doing it. It's the only reason I'm really putting this much effort forth in it. Most times they'll puff up pretty good. Don't really have to worry too much about it. Alrighty. And that's going to be good for this evening. I'll let this dry and attack it again tomorrow. Okay. So, glue's had a couple days to dry here. Got a fresh battery, fresh sandpaper, fresh sanded smooth. Once we get sanded smooth, we can move on to kind of the actual finishing steps. But this should be the point where I can sand it, find out kind of how close we are to where I want it to be. Just give it kind of a rough, make sure it's pretty kind of thing. We'll sand it to a higher grid, raise the grain, blah, blah, blah. You've seen it done before. We're just going to do that again. Raising the grain on cutting boards, though, very, very something that makes a difference, like a lot. So there's a lot of things I think people kind of overdo. Raising the grain on a cutting board really does make a huge difference. So yeah, let's sand off the wood filler, see where we get. Okay, after doing about everything we're going to do with 60 right now, feels pretty decent, at least a good start. Might hit this last little bit. That feels good. Okay, now we're going to round over the corners to start with. This is just a simple router. I usually use a fairly small bit just to take the edge off the corner. It makes it look nice, makes it look finished, without making it look all round and lovely. So I'll switch my router, keep going. And just like that, we're back to do some routing. I've got what I do believe is, I'm going to call it about a 1/4 inch router bit in here. I think that's what it is. So get this all lined up pretty. Okay, let's take the corners off. Okay, that's my top side. Looks really good. See some sandings, make everything nice and pretty and smooth. Now we're going to switch over to a chamfer bit. I would like to use my bigger chamfer, but I don't remember if it fits in this router, so we're going to find out here real quick. If not, I'll go with a smaller chamfer. Either way, no big deal. You can also do this on the table saw. That's not real hard. I'm just already in a router kind of mood, so we're going to keep going with the router. And the chamfer, the whole bottom side, see if I can bring in the overall, make it seem a little bit less chunky, but still pretty beefy, give you a little more to hold on to. Wrong size. Smaller bit. It'll look nice, and I'm definitely not in the mood to bring out my bigger router right now, so this will look just fine. Get this lined up. Let's do some chamfers. And we'll give it a real nice look. Dusty. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, you guessed it, more sanding. We're going to go through some grains here. First, we're sticking with our 60. We're going to go ahead and knock out the corners, make sure everything's nice and smooth on those. Give us a good baseline. We're going to go from 60 to 120, 120 to 220. Once we get to 220, we'll be more into popping up the grain then. Basically, we spray the grain, with nice, clean, plain water, it'll raise it up, hit it again. That way when the board gets wet, it doesn't raise the grain and then it not come back down. You want to basically pre-wet it, knock it down to what it will be next time it gets wet. Makes everything way, way, way smoother. It's definitely something that if you're building outdoor furniture, I wouldn't care less. If you're building something like this, it is worth every second of the effort. It really, really does make a significant difference. Okay, let's get some sanding. That looks good and feels good, and I haven't even raised the grain yet. I haven't even switched to 220. Just at 120, that feels real nice. Okay, so clean this bad boy off. Let's switch over to 220. I don't know if you can hear it in the video, but there's the most annoying cricket in the background, driving me nuts. Let's drown him out with some sanding. I don't know what it is about 220 on a good hardwood, but it feels sexy, I'm just saying. Okay, so now that I've got it all sanded perfectly smooth, I'm going to go ahead and screw it up a little bit. I'm going to route a juice groove in here, make it nice and juicy. So I'll grab my little jig I've got for that and we'll do the juice groove. Okay, little juice groove jig that I made here. All mine is just a 90-degree corner. Just basically allows me to put whatever I'm trying to put a juice groove in inside of here with a little bit of an offset. And this offset that's in here is just 1x material, actually 2x material, I guess. And it's just enough to offset the little flange around the router here. So it gets me right where I need to put a nice juice groove in. Double check I got that right. Yes, I do. Beautiful. Gives me right where I need. Just basically hold this tight up against here, work down the line. And I'm going to make this one start out real minor. We're going to do this in, I think, 2 passes. If you do it too deep, too quickly, that's when you get nice burnt lines all around your juice groove, and those are big pain to sand off and everything. So start out a little bit shallow, go for a second pass. Well, it's definitely no CNC juice groove, but it's definitely the juiciest groove I've cut all day. I don't want to brag or nothing. Okay, so what we're going to do with this is do a little bit of hand sanding, just kind of clean it up. Short of that, we got a juice groove. A little bit of burn in these corners. Nothing we can't sand away, I'm sure. Lighter there. Plenty light enough. Okay. So now we got our juice groove. That's pretty much the only shaping that we had left to do. So now we're going to go ahead and raise the grain and hit it with some more 220. As with everything, sanding is 90% of the work. But yeah, this is the fun part, so we get to actually get somewhere with it. So just dampen it up. You don't need to soak it, but just dampen it up. It'll immediately soak up that water. It's nice and dry. It'll just like a sponge. And you can immediately feel it's just not pleasant anymore. Wish it was, but it's not. How times were good back when it was smooth. Aging gets you every time. Okay, so We'll let this absorb for just a second here. Get everything popped up. Doing it, you can feel it. And we'll get back to our good old buddy 220. I rarely, for wood, going past 220 is almost kind of silly. Anybody tells you it's not, but I don't do anything fancy enough to require past 220. I mean, past 220 on a surface that's inherently going to have some grit regardless seems silly. Okay. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and hit all the other sides real quick. Just give a little quick knockout. On cutting boards, I'll raise the top grain twice, the bottom grain and side grain once. I don't see the point in caring that much about the bottom. It's the bottom. But the top, I need a little bit extra effort. I mean, spending 5 extra minutes on something that in theory will last a lifetime, it's worth it. Okay, I'm going to vacuum this, blow it off the air compressor. We'll hopefully get a couple beauty shots before we move to the actual fun finishing parts. So let's take a look. Okay, so it's pretty, it's a nice cutting board. Not the best cutting board I've ever made, but honestly, I'm real pleased with it for all the amount of effort and money that really went into it. It's a good board. It'll definitely see a lot of use. So now we've got it cleaned off. It's pretty. Now we go to the letting it dry for a little bit because I want to make sure it's 100% dry before I start the next step. Next step requires a little bit of finesse, so we're going to go ahead and start that after I'm sure that everything's 100% ready to go. Okay, we'll start in a second. Okay, now you see the magic. A nice Cricut stencil. My wife has a Cricut, and she loves it more than anything in the world. I think sometimes more than me. Yeah, this was perfect for it. Basically, we're making a Ouija board cutting board. Fun Halloween themed, useful item. Should be a fun little conversation piece. The way we're going to do it, since you cannot use any sort of inks or anything like that to be food safe, we're doing it with food coloring. Black food coloring, it seems anymore, only seems to come in gel form, which will not work for this. I need liquid. I need very thin liquid too. So, what we're doing here, mix up some food coloring, and then we're going to take a paper towel very lightly, and I would recommend test piece after test piece after test piece before you hack at this. The end grain here will soak up more than you'd ever possibly imagine. So you basically put it to the stencil, and you got a big blob under the stencil. It is amazing how far it'll go. So you need the smallest, littlest, teensiest, tiniest bit of actual food coloring on your paper when you tap it on there. And just tap it on there. Don't squeeze it. Don't hold it down. It'll soak right in. Little, teensy tiny coat. Won't take much. It'll stain pretty deep. You don't have to worry about it. So, I'm going to do that now. But first, I'm putting on a rubber glove because I have a feeling I'm going to be squeezing this thing out to make sure I have very, very minimal contact here. And the last thing I want is bright blue fingers. I've come to find with the food coloring The pack that I got came in red, green, blue, and yellow. The yellow makes it almost look brown if you mix some of that in, so that's no good. Because we want as black as possible, so I'm trying just red, green, and blue. See what we can make happen here. And I might even test piece this particular batch on some of the cutoffs. Thank goodness I don't clean up after myself, huh? Okay, so we'll go ahead and mix this around, get it all together. Oh, that looks good black. Yeah, we might have a winner. Okay. I'll get this out of my way before I make a mistake and end up with something I'm real not happy about. Okay. Dip this in there, soak up a whole bunch. Oh, that looks super good and black, yay. Squeeze off 95% of it. Looks kind of green. So, let's add a little more red. Blacken it up. This is something like this tiny amount should take care of the whole thing. It does not take much at all. I mean, an absolute minuscule amount is enough. That's way better. Okay, let's do this. And this is my very first time actually trying this on a finished product. I did a couple test pieces just to see if this was going to work quite like I think it did. And they turned out okay. They were a good learning experience. So let's go ahead and go gung-ho and make this happen. Let's stick this down as much as possible so nothing leaks by. Okay. Squeezing out. Cool. Let's try it. Might be too much right there already. See, I'm breaking my own rules. Soak up some of that there. Now things will look a little better. Just lightly just scuffing it to make a mark. And having this not be perfectly square, hard lines really kind of adds to it. It's a Ouija board after all. A little bit of not perfectness is not a bad thing. This first dab of food coloring might get me all the way through this board. It keeps going like this. The color looks fantastic. A little bit blue, a little bit green, but it looks more black than anything, which is what I was shooting for. And this is also why I was very concerned earlier about the board being dry again. If the board's not dry, this would have just seeped all the way through everything. So it had to be as dry and as clear as possible. The cool part is this will be neat looking and also food safe because of the food coloring. So you don't have to worry about it. You can actually use it. This would be the absolute perfect board for like serving Halloween snacks or just to have out with some cheese on it or something. Or just to sit on your counter and be a cool kitchen decoration. I have a feeling this will be getting used year round in our house, but it's perfect Halloween decor. Go for a little refresher. Super duper light pressure, just barely kissing it. And we're going to really hope this pans out like my test samples did. This is also something, definitely do not use like a cotton swab or a brush or a sponge or anything like that. Immediately those things will soak dry into the wood. Not at all the look you're going for. Unless you're just trying to dye the wood black, then that's definitely the look you're going for. If you're trying to do a stencil type pattern like this, definitely not what you're shooting for. Okay, I gotta switch hands. There we go. It's comforting when I have to push a little bit harder to get a little on there, because then I know it's not too much. When you open up this video, you said to yourself, there's no way I'm going to watch this guy dab food coloring on something. Gotcha. And of course, I had to make this thing have all kinds of detail, little tiny curls and stuff. Sometimes I'm not super smart when it comes to projects. It looks cool, and I'm sure it'll be awesome. But it's definitely not fun when it comes to picking out all the little stuff with this little teeny tiny tool. It's just not fun. Links I will go to for a cool video for you guys. And if this turns out terrible, I'm going to show you guys and then sand this bad boy down and just have an ice cutting board. That's the great part about woodworking. There's always an alternate way to do about anything. I think I about nailed it on the quantity here. Squeezy, squeezy. There's a bug attacking my light and it was freaking me out. The joys of working in a garage. Alrighty. What's off? We're gonna let this dry and then tear off the stencil and see if it turned out. Fingers crossed. Otherwise, this will be a really awkward video. Okay, now comes the super moment of truth. Let's see if it actually worked. It should have, but that's a big should, so let's figure it out together. Fingers crossed. Okay, this is going to take 6 years to unvinyl this, so we're going to definitely high speed the crap out of this. Then I get you some shots. Then, after I get done peeling all this up, I'm going to give it a real light sand. Then we're going to finish it. We're going to do beeswax and mineral oil, just kind of a classic finish. Should look really good. I do find it kind of funny that the cricket that is behind me while I'm working on a project with the cricket. They didn't even think it was funny. They stopped squeaking. Okay, turned out pretty awesome. So, I'm going to hit it. Very light 220. Lightening it up just a little bit, which is good. Okay, now comes the fun part, the finish. Turned out pretty nice. I'm pretty pleased with that. Okay, finish. For this, we're going to go with kind of a classic finish. Stay. That looks weird in the camera. Still looks weird in the camera. Okay. We're going to go with kind of a classic finish of beeswax and mineral oil. Put that bad boy off to the side. There we go. For this, going back to my little fun glue containers. Finish peeling out a little bit left over in there. I think last time this was used, it was used for the mineral oil and beeswax, but quick knockout. Okay. So, the first thing we're going to do, hit this with some mineral oil. It'll soak up quite a bit, so we're going to go ahead and just kind of rub across. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. I'm not a fan of dunking. I always think that's kind of silly, but it will eat up quite a bit. I actually think I might even do a little extra bit of fun finish with this. Best thing about doing it this way, makes your hands nice and touchable. It's so smooth. Feels wonderful. Okay. Now is where we're going to have a little fun. Fire. Concerning what this is and the whole Ouija board aspect and all that good stuff, it would seem to me that a little flame around the edge would be kind of nice. A little bit more look than just a standard cutting board. So a little random flame, blacken it up, make it look a little bit more interesting. Flame as a decoration can be kind of a fun thing and just kind of interesting and natural and random, and it's kind of cool. There, that's way more interesting than it was previously. Adds a whole new angle. Okay, back to what we were doing. More and more. We're going to soak this pretty well, but like I said, we're not dunking it. We're not doing anything like that. Just soaking it pretty good. Let it soak in what it can. Then we'll go with the actual final finish. But this will definitely soak up quite a bit. Pour myself a little working pool here. And all that is, like you've seen in a bunch of other cutting board videos, just food grade mineral oil. Nothing super special. Soaks it in. It helps with the water repellents. Helps keep any funky organisms out of it. The more the wood fibers are full, the less likely they are to attract actual food waste and things like that. Various food juices that are no good. So you keep them full and they repel everything. This works out well. The bird spots are giving a little bit of a char to the mineral oil, making it kind of smear across a little bit, adding a little aging look to it. Looking snazzy now. Before I get too far to the bottom there. It needs an official Everyday Maker's stamp. Beautiful. Now we can pour some more on. The cool thing too is any tiny little voids, like I mentioned before, will actually puff up when they soak up this oil. So it tightens up every little bit. Definitely not going to fix giant gaps, but little tiny things, it really makes a difference. We'll let that do its little bit of soaking in, and we'll get our beeswax ready. This is block beeswax. Chunk of it over here. Just a big brick of legit straight beeswax. And we'll be adding it to some oil. More here. Adding it to the oil. I try to add it in a fairly thick concentration. Makes it more of a cream rather than an oily type deal. But you can do it in the oven, you can do it in the microwave. I just use a heat gun most of the time. Melt it down. Works out pretty well, nice, quick, and easy.
Two hours later.
Okay, so phone, of course, went dead while I was recording that. Exciting footage of me melting wax. So I went ahead and finished the job here. Combined it all together with a little stir. Now we've got kind of a soft block. Just kind of a really thick paste. What I like to do with this is you'll see a lot of people really use a buffer and buff it in, things like that. I don't prefer to do that. I take it, basically just make a big mess of it. Smush it all around, get a nice waxy, gross coating all over everything. And this is all over everything. Get in the juice groove, get in everything, just leave a nice, just heavy wax coat. This is something you'll see it, can move it around. Just really get it gross on there, basically. You don't want this nice combined, you want it sitting on top, nice and thick. Okay, once we got that gross coating on there, back to the heat gun. So we're going to basically just melt this coating. It'll start bubbling, it'll start looking kind of funky, but it'll get real crystal clear real quick. So as you move the heat gun across, it'll get clear, it's not murky and gross. Essentially that just melts all the wax and gets it all very liquid and viscous, and it goes right through into the actual wood and then reseals in the wood. So you're not trying to shove it in there, you're actually just letting the wood absorb it naturally. Okay, now that's all super liquidy. We'll let it sit for just a little bit and just kind of soak up, do its thing, and then we're going to wipe off the excess. It doesn't take super long. You'll see it start to cloud up a little bit again. Then basically what's soaked in is going to soak in. There's something also you can repeat down the road if it starts to look dull, starts to look rough. You can go through and remelt it and add more to it. And it'll just keep soaking it up. Works really well. So now we're here. We're basically just rubbing in and wiping off excess. Now that it's kind of soaked up what it's going to soak up, just forcing that little last bit in. Wiping off some excess. So we're going to do this once with a towel that very quickly gets gross. And just kind of shove it in there. Really work it around. And then after that dries up a little bit, we'll do it once with a clean towel and kind of take off the excess. Beautiful. Continue. Do it on this side. Use our paste. And the beeswax and oil mixture, when they harden together, it makes it way thinner than the normal beeswax, but definitely way thicker than the oil. Gives you something you can actually work with. Kind of has the, I don't know, the thickness of a normal paste wax. So it's fairly easy to work around. But keep in mind that a heat gun can and will scorch wood. So if you've got something, I'm going with a scorched effect for the outside of this. If you've got something you don't want scorched, pay attention to that. That'll get you. Side grain doesn't soak up quite as much. Scorched parts are a really, really cool effect once they start to soak up a little bit of oil and wax. They look pretty cool. Okay, last thing to do before I really give this bad boy his real once-over cleaning. Get all the good stuff out of the nooks and crannies. We have feet. 4 feet. These you want to pre-drill because you're working with ingrain. You don't want to take a chance on blowing something out. Pre-drilling is your buddy. Figure out where you need to go. Usually go kind of right in the middle of one of my blocks. Gives me a reference point. Beauty. Okay. Now we just do a cleanup pass and really work this around, get all the excess off. And we're finished. It turned out rather well. Pretty pleased with that. It's easy to get a hold of. It's a good size. Perfect day-to-day cutting board. Just, you got to cut a tomato. You don't need a 3-foot slab. I mean, it's just silly. This should actually do really, really well. I see this getting some use and some conversation at the house. So, thanks everybody for coming along. We really appreciate you guys. I know these videos aren't the shortest, most, upbeat things in the world. They're just kind of how this actually happens. And we both appreciate you, Dan and I, watching our videos and kind of coming along for our journey. This is stuff we're making just for the fun of making it. I mean, we're not making any money off this, so that's definitely a thing. We just like to do projects. It keeps life interesting, gets our creative juices flowing. And something like this will be, at the very, very least, a nice Halloween decoration in the kitchen. And probably what will happen is it'll be the day-to-day cutting board for a while. I'm real happy with it. It's not perfect, but that's kind of makes it better because then I'm not scared to use it. I don't feel silly having it, looking too nice day-to-day. It's a good cutting board, good solid piece. Let's find out how thick it was total. After all said and done. Yeah, we're still just a little bit over 2 inches. So we only lost just under a 1/4 inch. So I'm pretty pleased with that. That's a nice, hefty board. Should take lots of chopping. So thanks again for watching. We appreciate you. Don't forget, like, subscribe, reshare. Comment also. If you think this is cool, comment. If you think it's terrible, comment. We appreciate the comments. Just kind of keeps us in touch with you guys. We want to be part of your lives too, I mean, as much as you're part of ours. So we appreciate you. See you on the next one. Come on, rubber glove. Don't make me look silly on camera.